Let's turn to Canada. Megan, you've been watching this race closely for months. Perhaps you could just begin by bringing listeners up to speed with how it's all played out. Perhaps start with Justin Trudeau stepping down, what his opponent, Pierre Poilievre, stood for, and then obviously, Carney's opponent in the end. But what's been going on?
Sure. Okay, so we actually have to go back before Trudeau stepped down. So he has been just massively unpopular in the country for, I would say, probably about 18 months before he stepped down. And, the Conservative opposition really used that to their advantage. Trudeau had been Prime Minister for 10 years by the time he stepped down, and people were just very, very tired of the Liberal government. Canada faced a lot of the same problems that Britain has faced, inflation, cost of living, housing shortages, and there was just really no support behind Trudeau. And what kind of was the tipping point is his Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who had long been considered the heir apparent to be the next Liberal leader. She resigned in December, and so Trudeau kind of realised time's up. So in January, he stepped down. And up until this moment, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, he had really, he just seemed like there was no way he could lose. This was his election. The next election was his to lose.
20 plus points, right?
Yes, 20 points up in the polls. And that was just consistent. He just kept going up and up and up over like an 18-month span. So, this definitely was his election to lose. But then Trump came to the White House and the entire calculus of the election changed. It became about a trade war, and I think even more significantly for many Canadians was not the economic peril that they were facing because of the tariffs, but all of this rhetoric we saw from Trump, calling it the 51st state and, joking that, Canada should just join the US and be blissfully happy under the American system and under President Trump, which, we were just talking about this briefly beforehand, and lots of people in America and the rest of the world do take it as a joke. In Canada, it just was not received that way. It was, I think, terrifying for a lot of people and just really unsettling. And so the entire calculus of the election changed. And with Trudeau stepping down, in came Mark Carney. And Mark Carney, he had a lot of, kind of benefits behind him. He has just like the most glittering CV imaginable you could imagine. He...
no politics, though.
And no politics. He wasn't a politician. So he didn't have any of the baggage of Trudeau, which Chrystia Freeland definitely did. When Liberal Party members voted for their next leader, she got 8% of the vote, which... ouch. But it's just because she had so much of the weight of Trudeau on her shoulders, whereas Carney was just a fresh slate. And he really was kind of saying all of the right things. We need to be strong. We need to stand up to Trump. This is our country.
I think this is the most extraordinary kind of personal story because I interviewed Mark Carney back in the day when he was governor of the Bank of England. And he was the dullest, driest, most news-repelling interview that you could imagine.
Get off the fence, Andrew.
Absolutely. Charming and well-turned out and smooth, but absolutely technocratic, Davos, elite, everything you can imagine a bank governor might be. We have got a much more, as it were, open, interesting governor of the Bank of England right now in Andrew Bailey. Anyway, so he was exactly what you'd expect. If you had to caricature Davos man, you'd end up with Mark Carney. And he's been trying to get into or talking about returning to politics in Canada for a long time. He's clearly a very patriotic Canadian. But this sudden switch from this kind of, as I say, rather bland and news-repelling figure to a kind of raunchy, tough, aggressive, populist, elbows up Canada and all the clips and the ice hockey and the very, very aggressive anti-Trump rhetoric. He out-Trumps in the aggression of some of his rhetoric, what he says about the White House. Quite extraordinary. And, of course, it worked enormously successfully for him.
You mentioned, obviously, we will know him here in the UK. Most people, at best, for his time as governor of the Bank of England between 2013 to 2020. He obviously oversaw us leaving the European Union, Brexit, and a bit of COVID. Do you think that kind of experience, albeit he hasn't got the frontline politics experience, but those were really difficult times. Is that going to allow him to weather the economic turmoil that's going to come with facing down Trump?
It certainly was a turbulent time. The economic turmoil, that's a very interesting point. But I also think that being governor of the Bank of England during the Boris Johnson years might have prepared him a little bit for how do you deal with a really unpredictable, turbulent, sort of charging around, roaring political leader like Trump. There is a parallel there. But certainly, yes, I mean, he knows turbulence, and he's worked in the private sector, of course, a lot, as well as in the public sector, trying to damp down and cope with big economic shocks. And the biggest economic shock, of course, we've had for a very, very long time is indeed the Trump tariff shock.
I mean, as we've touched on, Trump's been belittling Canada from the very start of his return to the office. How is Carney, do we think, going to handle it? Well, he's come out fighting, but he can't do that for his entire term. So what's he going to do, Megan?
I mean, this is where the politics are really going to catch up to him, because he has to definitely play to the home crowd. I mean, Canadians want a very tough leader at this moment. They want someone who's going to stand up, and also they want someone who's going to fix the economy. So it's not even just the tariffs. They want somebody who's going to fix all of the cost of living problems, inflation issues they were dealing with before, at the same time as taking on Trump. And I mean, there's just going to be a very fine line that Carney's going to have to walk right now of being outwardly tough and strong without, exacerbating the situation, antagonizing Trump needlessly, making it worse.
I think one thing that we're going to see is we're going to see Mark Carney across this side of the water a bit, because certainly in Brussels and around the EU, there is a sense that the world's politics are reshaping, and there is an opportunity for Europeans to get alongside Canada, get alongside Australia, get alongside other non-Trump Western economies and reshape things a bit. And I think there's going to be an awful lot of kind of love and open hands reached out towards Mark Carney from Europe in the next few months.
Have our own leaders here in the UK and others across the world, I mean, is there a lesson to be learned from Carney that actually you can win by coming out and just punching Trump in the face, really?
Well, you listen to Ed Davey, Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, and he thinks exactly, he is constantly attacking Trump in very, very personal terms, outraged by the fact he's been given another state visit later this year. There is a case for saying, actually, what Carney shows is that being anti-Trump is good politics. But I would also say that I think Britain's situation is completely different from Canada's. Trump had made an absolutely serious existential threat to Canada's existence. Canada had no choice but to fight back or fold, and they're fighting back, thank goodness for that. We are in a different situation. We have to do trade deals. We have to get on around the world, not just with the EU, our biggest trading partner, but also with the United States. So I think Keir Starmer is, treading a very fine, difficult, and not very elegant line with Trump, let's be honest, but it's probably the right thing to do.
Do we think this is a real turning point in global politics, because it's the first time that we've broken this so-called incumbency curse for quite a while? How do we interpret the result in Canada? Was it just, as Andrew said, it was unique because there was an existential threat, or should we interpret something wider? Megan, do you want to take that one first?
I mean, I think it was so funny that after Trump's victory, there was all of this narrative that, this was the hard right, global hard rights moment. And every country was going to see, just the rise and surge of Trump adjacent politicians. And that just has not come to be. I mean, Canada, yes, this was actually the opposite, and it had its unique circumstances. But even look at Germany in February, when everyone was predicting that the AfD would just, kind of storm through elections. They did do better than they've ever done, but we saw that the support of J.D. Vance and Elon Musk didn't really give them much of a boost from what they had had previously in polls. And I think, that the whole idea that the global far right were going to follow along and get a big Trump boost has been very, very over-egged.
Political determinism is always a very, very dangerous thing. It wasn't so long ago everybody was saying, as Megan has referred to, that, basically there's a massive conservative or far right or hard right revolution, thundering around the Western world. I probably said that too at the same time. But, every country has different politics. Every country has different situations. In no other country has the right-wing leader faced the same kind of court case that Marine Le Pen faced. You know, in no other country have we had a right-wing leader who has behaved, as it were, so centrist as Meloni in Italy. Every country is different. Every country is different. And similarly, it would be very, very dangerous right now to say, aha, the world is turning against Trump everywhere. Let's look at Australia. Let's look at Canada. The world is turning to a more sort of liberal kind of politics again. That would be incredibly premature and very silly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Australia, which heads to the polls this weekend, and certainly the incumbent Labour government there, centre-left government, I guess, of Anthony Albanese, they do appear to have also benefited from this sort of anti-Trump sentiment. I found it extraordinary. I was listening to Radio 4 earlier this week, and they had former Liberal Prime Minister, so kind of right of centre of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull on, and he refused to say that he was endorsing his own party.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't recall ever in this country that you'd have that.
I think the much safer thing to talk about is the underlying politics. Megan referred to inflation earlier on in Canada. I think the turbulence caused by Trump's tariffs is going to cause economic pain and inflation right around the world. And I think that, combined with continuing fears about migration and a continuing worry about the need to rebuild defences, is going to drive politics. So I think we are still in the politics of reshoring industry in the West, getting industry moving again, building up defences, being very, very concerned about immigration, and above all, thinking about cost of living, the biggest single problem of all. If that is true, then we're in for more turbulent politics, more surprises, more shatterings of previous elites than we've seen before. And I think that's the likeliest thing ahead.
I wonder if you both sense that we will see a more of an anti-Trump backlash, though, in the next 6 months or so. I mean, we've seen this week's marks 100 days of the second Trump administration. He's got the lowest approval rating, I think, of any president in the last 70 years. And then Canada is going to be hosting the G7 in June. Is it a chance? I mean, it's very difficult to gang up on the US, but do we see that there's an opportunity here for...
I think the only people who can gang up on the US are the US. Yeah. And in a sense, I think all around you see Trump, hitting the buffers of reality around him. It's not just the opinion polling, which is very striking in the States, but it's also the fact that after year after year after year of growth during the Biden administration, the American economy actually shrunk. Not by much, by 0.3%, but nonetheless shrunk during the first 3 months of this year. That's the kind of thing that is going to have to make him pause. He may not worry about every move of the stock market. He may think in his second presidency he can kind of ignore big money a little bit, but he can't ignore the impact on ordinary American voters. And I think that's the single biggest pushback that he's going to face.
One of the most interesting things to me from the Signal Group leak that we saw in the Atlantic, where Trump's security team was chatting about, striking in Yemen, was J.D. Vance flagging, is this the best thing to do given the economy at the moment? I'm paraphrasing. But that was just the clearest indication that actually the people around Trump are very kind of worried what is happening in the economy. And I do think that if things continue on the path we're on now and the people around Trump and his biggest supporters start to worry about their own careers and their own futures, we could start to see a distancing of themselves from Trump, and that's when things really could start to fall apart.
Well, as we've said on this podcast before, we're talking about a court, not a conventional political establishment there. And it's the politics of court. It's the politics of the courtiers surrounding the great monarch and wondering who's going to replace him is very important. Interesting story today, Susie Wiles, the very experienced chief of staff, seems to have finally pushed out Elon Musk. She said that she doesn't see him much in person in the White House anymore. That doesn't matter. They talk by phone. But the expulsion of Musk from the real core of the Trump regime is now unavoidably the case. It's humiliating for him. It's been, and there was somebody
for Musk or for Trump or both?
Well, I think it's particularly humiliating for Elon Musk at the moment. He's had a very, very bad few weeks. But there was somebody, if we had been sitting here, 6 weeks ago, we would have thought Elon Musk, he is one of the great powers in today's world and he's going to be there for a very, very long time and he's gone already. That's what happens in courts.